Yeah. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. I don't know why my background is changed without my knowledge. It's a technical thing going on here. Okay, so let's do the invocation, and then we can discuss chapter 26 of third canto. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Nashta Prayeshvabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtuki. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So Hare Krishna, dear devotees, welcome to this Thursday Bhagavatam session. So today we will be discussing the chapter overview of chapter 26 of third canto, entitled Fundamental Principles of Material Nature. Believe me or not, after reading this chapter a good few times, my chanting improved. I was just mentioning, to Sumed, my son, how complicated this Sankhya or the Jnana aspect of it, analyzing the material elements and their interaction is quite complicated. If you read this chapter, it's it's not that easy and to fully get into and make sense of it. So I was thinking Prabhupada had given such a wonderful and easy process that we can follow, bhakti, and which is superior to all other processes, other processes such as yoga, jnana. Bhakti is superior to them. So it is quite a technical, extremely technical chapter. This is similar to fifth chapter of the third canto, fifth chapter of second canto. It was similar. We had discussed this. It's how the various elements are formed, how the entire creation is material creation is made. So we have done it. We will just go through it briefly again. There are 72 verses, I think, quite a bit. But we will be discussing. We will not be going too technical aspect of it, but we will give a summary, very much brief overview of these 72 verses. So before we get into, let me just summarize what had been discussed in the previous chapters. So we are discussing the Kardama Muni Devahuti story, pastime is going on. After Devahuti, the wife of Kardama Muni, begot Kapila Dev as Kapila Dev. So Kardama took permission from his own son, who is not different from the Lord. So Kardama took permission from his son Kapila and left for forest. After that, Mother Devabhuti, then she inquired from the Lord Kapila, and her question was, how can I come out of this aham mameti concept? So I think someone is asking how they can join. Can you share the meeting ID? Would someone be able to share the meeting details?
Yes, I'll do that.
Yeah, thank you. Right. So our first question was, how can I come out of this aham mameti? Aham means I am this body. Mameti means everything, yes, everything relates to me. This is mine, that is mine, like that. Mameti, this, conception of possessing. So first thing was the coming out of the bodily platform and coming out of all the bodily relationships. So Kapila Muni, Lord Kapila, answered saying that the best way to come out of this materialistic mentality is to perform devotion or yoga, adhyatmika yoga. It consists of jnana, yoga, and bhakti. Jnana is knowledge, and yoga is yes, performing ashtanga yoga, and bhakti. But out of which, out of these three, bhakti is the superior. And how do we develop this bhakti, devotion? So the answer to the question was develop bhakti. If we perform bhakti, our materialistic tendency will be given out. But how do you perform that bhakti? By associating with the saintly people. It would be difficult to perform bhakti on our own. So we can only perform this bhakti devotion by associating with the saintly people. And then the characteristics of saintly people were given. How they are peaceful, they are tolerant, and they have no enemies, and they are kind to every living being, and they mainly and formally engage in the devotional service to the Lord. Those are the characteristics of sadhu or a saintly person. So Lord Kapila tells that you should associate with saintly people and hear from them. Hearing from saintly people is most conducive to devotional service. And then Devotee then questions what type of bhakti, what type of devotion should be performed. And Lord Kapila tells that you should perform bhava bhakti. If that is not possible, then you should do bhakti. Sadhana bhakti means bhakti which involves with the rules and following rules and regulations. So that chapter itself is a little technical, and the current one is going to be more technical. If anyone had joined today for the first time, I asked them to bear with us because this is a quite technical chapter, So please don't think that Srimad Bhagavatam will be, every chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam will be like this. No, there are some portions they are too technical, and so please kindly bear with us. So I will share the screen, and we may not be able to read every verse today, but we will read some verses. Okay, Ambada Prabhu, you can start reading first. Yeah, first 8 verses, please.
Yes, Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
I will read on my own screen.
Yeah. This one, yeah.
Okay. Text 1. The personality of Godhead, Kapila, continued. My dear mother, now I shall describe unto you the different categories of the absolute truth, knowing which any person can be released from the influence of the modes of material nature. Text 2. Knowledge is the ultimate perfection of self-realization. I shall explain that knowledge unto you, by which the knots of attachments to the material world are cut. Text 3. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Supreme Soul, and he has no beginning. He is transcendental to the material modes of nature and beyond the existence of this material world. He is perceivable everywhere because he is self-effulgent, and by his self-effulgent luster, the entire creation is maintained. Text 4. As his pastimes, that Supreme Personality of Godhead, the greatest of the great, accept the subtle material energy, which is invested with 3 material modes of nature and which is related with Vishnu. Text 5. Divided into varieties by her threefold modes, material nature creates the forms of the living entities, and the living entities, seeing this, are illusioned by knowledge covering feature of the illusory energy. Text 6. Because of his forgetfulness, the transcendental living entity accepts the influence of material energy as his field of activities, and thus actuated, he wrongly applies the activities to himself. Text 7. Material consciousness is the cause of one's conditional life, in which conditions are enforced upon the living entity by the material energy. Although the spirit soul does not do anything and is transcendental to such activities, he is thus affected by conditional life. Text 8. The cause of the conditioned soul's material body and the senses presiding deities, the demigods, is the material nature. This is understood by learned men. The feelings of happiness and distress of the soul, who is transcendental by nature, are caused by the spirit soul himself.
Thank you. Right.
Hare Krishna.
So, Hare Krishna. In this chapter, Lord Kapila explains about Sankhya. Sankhya means, Sankhya is a number, counting. So this is the analysis of material elements. We discussed several times in the previous chapters. The entire material world consists of 24, 25 elements. So here, Lord Kapila is going to describe the analysis, the characteristics, or the interaction of these 24 elements. And he tells that, what is the benefit of hearing this Sankhya philosophy? This is also called Jnana, Jnana path, knowledge. So here, Lord Kapila tells that, freedom from the modes of nature, and you'll be able to cut the knot of attachment. When you analyze that, this is only matter, And these are individual elements. I'm an individual soul. There is spirit soul. And actually, you understand that this is only temporary, and due to interaction of some elements, I'm experience these kind of feelings like that. You kind of develop detachment. As a result of that, you'll be able to make progress. You will not be subjected to bondage. But if you do bhakti, automatically the knowledge and detachment automatically develops. Here in this chapter gives you knowledge without bhakti. But if one does bhakti to Vasudeva, Lord Krishna, one gets the knowledge as well as detachments as byproduct. That is a very, very important verse. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janayatyashu Vairagyam Jnanam Chayadahaitakam. I will post that verse. I'll send that verse in the message in our Sangha group. We learned this verse in the 2nd chapter of 1st canto. Just by worshipping the Lord, one automatically develops knowledge as well as detachment. So that is the advantage of hearing Sankhya. You try to be detached. Here, basically, the material nature. This chapter is somewhat similar to 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. In the 13th chapter is entitled, if you remember, 13th chapter is entitled Nature, Material Nature, Spirit, Soul, and the Living Entity. What is that? Yeah, let me see. Yeah, Nature, the Enjoyer, and the Consciousness. Nature is Prakriti, and the enjoyer is Lord, Supreme Lord, and consciousness means is Chaitanya. There is also living entity there. Okay, so and in text 3, from text 3 to text 8, Kapiladev kind of describes the interactions between the living entity, material nature, and the Supreme Lord. Okay, Supreme Lord has 2 energies. There are multi-energies, but just to simplify, 2 energies. We know that in the 7th chapter of Gita also, Krishna says there is a superior energy and inferior energy. So the spirit soul belong to the category of superior energy. Yes, yeah. And inferior energy is material nature. So when we reject the Lord and come to this material world, we are put into this material nature, and we have so many material desires, and these desires will be fulfilled by the material nature. Material nature is Prakriti. And this material nature is actually a product of the Lord. That's the first point. Material nature is a product of the Lord. It comes from the Lord. Although it comes from the Lord is aloof from it. Quite technical. Yes, it comes from the Lord, and Lord is aloof from it. It doesn't get affected. Even when he comes down as Krishna, Rama, other incarnations, he will not be affected by this material nature. And whereas the living entity, to fulfill his desires, he will be entangled in this material nature. Material nature creates different bodies, different forms. All this, he becomes involved in this karmic reaction and subjected to bondage. This is what Lord Kapila tells. And then Mother Devahuti asks more questions. We will read the next section. That is going to be a little longer, from 9 to 49. There are 40 verses. So we can probably, different devotees can read different bits. I will share the screen and let's see, where is it? Yeah, here. So, yeah. So Radha Mataji, did you join today first time?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Would you like to read by any
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, from text 9 to 10 verses, 19 or 20. Yeah, up to 20, please.
Right. Okay, sure. Thank you, sir. Text 10. The Supreme
Text
Personality.
9, please. 9,
Yeah.
9.
Text 9. Devahuti said, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, kindly explain the characteristics of the Supreme Person and his energies. For both of these are the causes of this manifest and unmanifest creation. Text 10. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, the unmanifested eternal combination of the three modes is the cause of the manifest state and is called pradhana. It is called prakriti when it is manifested stage of existence. Text 11. The aggregate elements, namely the 5 gross elements, the 5 subtle elements, the 4 internal senses, the 5 senses for gathering knowledge, and the 5 outward organs of action are known as the pradhana. Text 12. There are 5 gross elements, namely earth, water, fire, air, and ether. There are also 5 subtle elements, smell, taste, color, touch, and sound. Text 13. The senses for acquiring knowledge and the organs for action number 10, namely the auditory sense, the sense of taste, the tactile sense, the sense of sight, the sense of smell, and the active organs for speaking, working, traveling, generating, and evacuating. Text 14. The internal subtle senses are experienced as having 4 aspects in the shape of mind, intelligence, ego, and contaminated consciousness. Distinctions between them can be made only by different functions, since they represent different characteristics. Text 15. All these are considered the qualified Brahman. The mixing element, which is known as time, is counted as the 25th element. Text 16. The influence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is felt in the time factor, which causes fear of death due to the false ego of the deluded soul who has contacted material nature. Text 17. My dear mother, O daughter of Swayambhu Manu, the time factor, as I have explained, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom the creation begins as a result of the agitation of the neutral unmanifested nature. Text 18. By exhibiting his potencies, the Supreme Personality of Godhead adjusts all these different elements, keeping himself within as a Supreme Soul and without as time. Text 19. After the Supreme Personality of Godhead impregnates material nature with his internal potency, material nature delivers the sum total of the cosmic intelligence, which is known as Hiranmaya. This takes place in material nature when she is agitated by the destinations of the conditioned souls. Text 20. Thus, after manifesting variegatedness, the effulgent Mahadatwa, which contains all the universes within itself, which is the root of all cosmic manifestations, and which is not destroyed at the time of annihilation, swallows the darkness that cover the effulgence at the time of dissolution.
Okay, thank you. So someone probably, Amsini Mataji, would you like to read next 10 verses, please? If you can, otherwise, are you able to read?
I can. I just have to make an adjustment. Bear with me. What chapter, what text am I on, please?
Text 21 onwards.
Thank you. The mode of goodness, which is clear. Let me just take myself away from my machine because that's going to disturb you. The mode of goodness, which is the clear, sombre status of the understanding the personality of Godhead, and which is generally called Vasudeva, or consciousness, becomes manifest in the Mahadatwa. Text 22. After the manifestation of the Mahadatwa, these features appear simultaneously. As water in its natural state, before coming in contact with earth, is clear, sweet, and unruffled, so the characteristic traits of pure consciousness are complete serenity, clarity, and freedom from distraction. Text 23 to 24. The material ego springs up from the Mahadatwa, which, so I have to move your picture, which evolve from the Lord's own energy. The material ego is endowed predominantly with active power of three kinds: good, passionate, and ignorant. It is from these three types of material ego that the mind, the senses of perception, the organs of action, and the gross elements evolve. The three ahankara, the source of the gross elements, the senses, and the mind, is identical with them because it is their cause. It is known by the name of Sankarshan, who, sorry, I've lost myself.
Sorry, which text are you reading?
I'm not sure now because Sankarshan, right, who is directly Lord Ananta with 1,000 heads. Text 26. This false ego is characterized as the doer, as an instrument, and as an effect. It is further characterized as serene, active, and dull, according to how it is influenced by the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Text 27. From the false ego of goodness, another transformation takes place. From this evolves the mind, whose thoughts and reflections give rise to desire. Text 28. The mind of the living entity is known by the name of Lord Aniruddha, the supreme ruler of the senses. He possesses a bluish-black form resembling a lotus flower growing in the autumn. He is found slowly by the yogis. Text 29. By transformation of the false ego in passion, intelligence takes birth. O virtuous lady, the functions of intelligence are to help in ascertaining the nature of objects when they come into view and to help the senses. Text 30. Doubt, misapprehension, correct apprehension, memory, and sleep, as determined by their different functions, are said to be the distinct characteristics of intelligence. Do you want me to read another text?
Yeah, another 10, please. Yeah.
Another text, okay. Text 31. Egoism in the mode of passion produces two kinds of senses: the senses for acquiring knowledge and the sense of action. The senses of action depend on the vital energy, and the senses for acquiring knowledge depend on intelligence. Text 32. When egoism in ignorance is agitated by the sex energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the subtle element sound is manifest, and from sound come the ethereal sky and the sense of hearing. Text 33. Persons who are learned and who have true knowledge define sound as that which conveys the idea of an object, indicates the presence of a speaker screened from our view, and constitutes the subtle form of ether. Text 34. The activities and characteristics of the ethereal element can be observed as the accommodation of room for the external and internal existences of all living entities, namely the field of activities of the vital air, the senses, and the mind. Text 35. From ethereal existence, which evolves from sound, the next transformation takes place under the impulse of time, and thus the subtle element touch, and thence the air and sense of touch become prominent. Text 36. Softness and hardness, and cold and heat are the distinguishing attributes of touch, which is characterized as the subtle form of air. Text 37. The action of the air is exhibited in movements mixing, allowing approach to the objects of sound and other sense perceptions, and providing for the proper functioning of all other senses. Text 38. By interaction of the air and the sensations of touch, one receives different forms according to destiny. By evolution of such forms, there is fire, and the eye sees different forms in colour. Text 39. My dear mother, the characteristics of form are understood by dimension, quality, and individuality. The form of fire is appreciated by its effulgence. Text 40. Fire is appreciated by its light and by its ability to cook, to digest, to destroy cold, to evaporate, and to give rise to hunger, thirst, eating, and drinking. Text 41. By the interaction of fire and the visual sensation, the subtle element taste evolves under a superior arrangement. From taste, water is produced, and the tongue which perceives taste is also manifested. Is that where you wish me to end?
There are actually text 49 up to 49, please.
Right, okay. I didn't want to take away from somebody else. Right, which perceives taste is also manifested. Text 42. Although originally one, taste becomes manifold as astringent, sweet, bitter, pungent, sour, and salty due to contact with other substances. Text 43. The characteristics of water are exhibited by its moistening of other substances, coagulating various mixtures, causing satisfaction, maintaining life, softening things, driving away heat, incessantly supplying itself to reservoirs of water, and refreshing by slacking thirst or shaker. Text 44. Due to the interaction of water with the taste perception, the subtle element odour evolves under superior arrangement. Thus, the earth and the olfactory sense, by which we can variously experience the aroma of the earth, become manifest. Text 45. Odour, although one, becomes many, as mixed, offensive, fragrant, mild, strong, acidic, and so on, according to the proportions of associated substances. Text 46. The characteristics of the function of earth can be perceived by modelling forms of the supreme Brahman, by constructing places of residence, by preparing pots to contain water, etc. In other words, the earth is the place of sustenance for all elements. Text 47. The sense whose object of perception is sound is called the auditory sense, and that whose object of perception is touch is called the tactile sense. Text 48. The sense whose object of perception is form, the distinctive characteristic of fire is the sense of sight. The sense whose object of perception is taste, the distinctive characteristic of water, is known as the sense of taste. Finally, the sense whose object of perception is odour, the distinctive characteristic of earth, is called the sense of smell. Text 49. Since the cause exists in its effect as well, the characteristics of the former are observed in the latter. That is why the peculiarities of all the elements exist in the earth alone. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Amsini Mataji. Would you like to summarize?
Oh wow! Do you know I've been going over and over this again and again,
Only
and I'm
kidding.
still
After reading that, after reading this chapter, I took my bead bag and I thoroughly enjoyed my chanting. Every time, when I start to chant, my mind wanders here and there. I normally, concentrate while chanting is a little bit difficult. But after reading this chapter, actually chanting became much easier. So complicated, so many things are there. Yes, but we will summarize in a simple manner. Don't worry that you need to understand everything. But let's, we have to move forward. There are certain things we have to understand that we can't understand fully. But this explanation is already given in 5th chapter of 3rd Canto. We did that in the past. So let me bring up something to make it simple. So I'm just trying to put a picture here. Let's see if that is any. Yeah. Okay. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Right. So we have seen this picture in the past also. So basically, Mother Devotee is asking how these elements, universal elements, are formed, each element, and how the entire creation has taken place. So initially, the material nature is in the subtle, unmanifested form that is known as pradhana. It is material, but it is subtle at the same time. It is pradhana. And so this pradhana, it has like, it is eternal, it is always existing. So let's see what are the characteristics of it. So this pradhana, it is also consists of the three modes of material nature. So when Lord glances this pradhana, then due to the time factor, it gets agitated. Then it becomes the next part, which is called Mahadatwa. Mahadatwa. And from Mahadatwa, it becomes Ahankar. So we have seen this. This one I will also post in the group. You can read it at your leisure. Basically, just by Lord glancing at this material nature, a subtle material nature, which is pradhana. So there are several ingredients takes place. Several ingredients are formed. So total, there are like 24 elements are formed. And each element has its function. There are some subtle elements, some gross elements, and senses, working senses, knowledge acquiring senses, and then so there is a mind, intelligence, and false ego, like that. So many elements are formed just because the Lord glanced it over this material nature, which is called pradhana, and each has its function. Sound has its function, touch has its function, like that. So various functions, various elements of various functions, as we all know. So these 24 elements, they can be seen here in the 13th chapter. We did this in the fast also. Maybe someone can read this. Right. Okay, who would like to read? 4 people already dropped after this chapter. Okay, Lalita Preeti, would you like to read? You're not there. Madhav Kumar Prabhu?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Would you be able to read?
Yes.
Okay, from this one. First there are.
I can
Thank
read.
you.
Okay, read.
Go on, Mataji.
Sorry, by the time I unmute. First, there are earth, water, fire, air, and ether. There are 5 great elements, Mahabhuta. Then there are false ego, intelligence, and the unmanifested stage of the 3 modes of nature. Then there are 5 senses for acquiring knowledge: the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. Then 5 working senses: voice, legs, hands, anus, and genitals. Then above the senses, there is the mind, which is within and which can be called the sense within. Therefore, including the mind, there are 11 senses altogether. Then there are 5 objects of the senses: smell, taste, form, touch, and sound. Then the aggregate of the 24 elements is called the field of activity.
That's fine.
So,
Yeah, 24 elements, and then time is the 25th element. That is Lord. Only when time enters it, then everything gets agitated, and entire interaction takes place. So what happens is, because of Lord's Lord entering as a time factor, then the elements, they come together. There is a cohesive energy that is given by the Lord, and they mix together. They form this universal shell. So there is one text that we may want to read here, purport. Text 17. Madhav Kumar Prabhu can read this purport. I will just.
Sure, Prabhu.
Yeah.
Purport only?
Yes, please.
The unmanifested state of material nature, pradhana, is being explained. The Lord says that when the unmanifested material nature is agitated by the glance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it begins to manifest itself in different ways. Before this agitation, it remains in the neutral state, without interaction by the 3 modes of material nature. In other words, material nature cannot produce any variety of manifestations without the contact of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is very nicely explained in Bhagavad Gita. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of the products of material nature. Without his contact, material nature cannot produce anything. Carry on?
Yeah, please.
In the Chaitanya Charitamrita also, a very suitable example is given in this connection. Although the nipples on a goat's neck appear to be breast nipples, they do not give milk. Similarly, material nature appears to the material scientist to act and react in a wonderful manner, but in reality it cannot act without the agitator, time, who is a representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When time agitates the neutral state of material nature begins to produce varieties of manifestations. Ultimately, it is said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of creation. As a woman cannot produce children unless impregnated by a man, material nature cannot produce or manifest anything unless it is impregnated by the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the form of the time factor. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you, Prabhu. At least this purport is is easy to understand for us. As you can see very nicely, Prabhupada explains that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Father, is seed-giving Father. Krishna says in the Gita as well, 14th chapter, 5th verse, Aham bija pradapita. So this material nature is like mother, and but the seed-giving Father is Krishna. Just by glancing at this material nature, everything automatically happens. But yes, that glancing is there. If Lord doesn't glance and Lord doesn't involve the time factor, impregnate the time factor, there the interactions would not take place. So people may think that this material nature is working automatically, but there is an engineering. There is an engineering done by the Lord. Krishna says that under my supervision, this material nature is producing both moving and non-moving beings. It is not independent. It is programmed in such a way by the Lord. That's why it is acting like us. Yes, Mahadatwa Prabhu?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, you're referring to Mayadakshena Prakriti.
Yes.
Charataram. I think in Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada's given another analogy of the scorpion eggs in rice.
Yes.
People think that the scorpions are being born out of piles of rice, but the truth is that the mother scorpion has laid the eggs in there, and then the baby scorpions are coming out. So similarly, Lord's glancing, and by his potency, Mother Nature is able to procreate.
Yeah. Excellent, Prabhu. Thank you so much. This once this uniform is formed, it has got several layers, and each layer is 10 times thicker than the previous. And we can see these layers in 52. So we studied as well before about these layers. So 52, I guess. Yes, somebody can read this. Anuradha Mataji, would you like to read the translation?
Yes, Hare Krishna Prabhuji. This universal egg, or the universe in the shape of an egg, is called the manifestation of material energy. Its layers of water, air, fire, sky, ego, and Mahadatwa increase in thickness one after another. Each layer is 10 times bigger than the previous one, and the final outside layer is covered by Pradhana. Within this egg is the universal form of Lord Hari, of whose body the 14 planetary systems are parts.
Yeah. So once with these 24 elements, the universal shell is formed. This universal shell floats on the ocean, Karnodaka ocean. There is an ocean where Mahavishnu lies, and it just floats there, and it stays there for thousands of years. And after that, the Lord enters into it. And within this universe, we know that there is 14 planetary system, and this 14 planetary system is compared to the body of the Lord, like and Virat Rupa. We call it universal form. In English, we call it universal form. In Sanskrit, we call it Virat Rupa, universal form. So different planets are like Brahmaloka. Topmost planet is compared to his head, like the bottom planet is compared to his feet, and the middle portion is compared to his waist, like that. So different planetary planets are compared to different organs of the Lord. And sometimes the rivers are compared to his veins, and the mountains are compared to his bones, and huge trees are compared to the hairs on the skin, like that. So the universal form is referred to. It is a bona fide imagination of the Lord, but it is not a true form of the Lord. It is only the material imagination. It's just imagination, imaginary form. When you call it universal form, it is an imaginary form. That is how it is described. But let's read the last verse of this chapter, which is 72. So, Sumedh, are you able to read? If not, then I will have to ask someone else. Anil Singh Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhu, you can read the translation and purport. We'll complete the chapter.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. So translation. Therefore, through devotion, detachment, and advancement in spiritual knowledge acquired through concentrated devotional service, one should contemplate that super soul as present in this very body, although simultaneously apart from it. Purport. One can realize the super soul within oneself. He is within one's body, but apart from the body, or transcendental to the body. Although sitting in the same body as the individual soul, the super soul has no affection for the body, whereas the individual soul does. Therefore, one has to detach himself from this material body by discharging devotional service. It is clearly mentioned here, Bhaktya, that one has to execute devotional service to the Supreme, as it is stated in the first canto, second chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, 1-7, Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha. When Vasudeva, the all-pervading Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is served in completely pure devotion, detachment from the material world immediately begins. The purpose of Sankhya is to detach oneself from material contamination. This can be achieved simply by devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When one is detached from the attraction of material prosperity, one can actually concentrate his mind upon the super soul. As long as the mind is distracted towards the material, there is no possibility of concentrating one's mind and intelligence upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or his partial representation, super soul. In other words, one cannot concentrate one's mind and energy upon the Supreme unless one is detached from the material world. Following detachment from the material world, one can actually attain transcendental knowledge of the absolute truth. As long as one is entangled in sense enjoyment or material enjoyment, it is not possible to understand the absolute truth. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 18:54. One who is freed from material contamination is joyful and can enter into devotional service. And by devotional service, he can be liberated. In the Srimad Bhagavatam first canto, it is stated that one becomes joyful by discharging devotional service. In that joyful attitude, one can understand the science of God or Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, it is not possible. The analytical study of the elements of material nature and the concentration of the mind upon the super soul or the sum and substance of the Sankhya philosophical system. The perfection of the Sankhya Yoga culminates in devotional service unto the absolute truth. Thus, in the Bhaktivedanta purports of the third canto, 26th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Fundamental Principles of Material Nature. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Anil Singh Prabhu. Appreciate it. Yes, so the perfection of this Sankhya Yoga culminates in devotional service unto the absolute truth. As we discussed, Prabhupada also mentioned, just by performing devotion unto Lord Krishna, automatically one develops detachment and one acquires knowledge. The purpose of Sankhya is to detach oneself from the material contamination. This can be achieved simply by devotional service onto the. See, this is the point Prabhupada mentioned. This can be achieved simply by devotional service onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, yes, just we can, Prabhupada has given us a very simple process. When we read these chapters, we understand, the importance of devotional service very much. And it is easy to perform. Susukam kartum avyayam. Susukam means it's joyfully performed. Susukam kartum. Kartum means it is doable. Anybody can do. Even a poor man, even an ignorant person who doesn't have knowledge, who doesn't have the intellectual ability to understand so many technical aspects of the scriptures, can simply perform by offering a fruit, flower, leaf, water with devotion to the Lord. And that is the secret. Prabhupada has, given us a shortcut simply by doing this, devotion. We will achieve all the, fruits of other performances. So let me read one verse. Vedeshu yajneshu tapassu chaiva. Whatever one gets by studying Vedas. Okay, first point. Remember that. Whatever fruit one gets by studying Vedas, Vedeshu, Yajneshu, whatever fruit one gets by performing various sacrifices that are given in the Vedic literature. Vedeshu, Yajneshu, Tapas, by undergoing penance and by giving in charity. So whatever one gets by studying Vedas, by performing Vedic sacrifices, by undergoing penances, by giving in charity, all that can be simply achieved by devotional service. And on top of that, the devotee will go back to Godhead. That's the famous verse from 8th chapter. Read that. Where is it? This one. Yeah. Let me just bring it to the screen. Yeah, 8:29. There you go. Ambara Prabhu, you can read the translation.
Hare Krishna. A person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas. Performing sacrifices, undergoing austerities, giving charity, and pursuing philosophical and fruitive activities. Simply by performing devotional service, he attains all these, and at the end he reaches the supreme eternal abode. Purport.
No, that's fine. I think you want to read the purport? No, that's fine. You can read. That's homework. Yeah. So that's the summary. So thank you very much, everyone. I know it's a little bit technical chapter, but it is simple that just by Lord glancing at the subtle material nature called pradhana, so many interactions takes place, and all the material elements, there are gross and subtle elements. All these 24 elements are formed just because of Lord's glancing at the material nature. And all these material nature elements, they come together and forms the universal shell. And this universal shell has several layers, and each is 10 times thicker than the other, the previous one. Yes. And after that, Lord enters into it, and he fills the universe with his perspiration. There is a planetary system, 14 planetary system is formed, and this planetary system is compared to the universal form of the Lord. Different planets are compared to different bodily parts of the Lord, like that. What Prabhupada says at the end is that the point of Sankhya philosophy is to develop detachment from this material nature that can be simply achieved by performing devotion on the Supreme Lord. That by doing devotion, one automatically develops detachment and acquires knowledge. So there is no separate endeavor to do that job. We can simply chant Hare Krishna mantra and do, follow 4 regulative principles and engage in performing these 9 types of devotional service, that would be enough for us. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Thank
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you.